former Fulton County District Attorney and Sheriff.
Formerly a judge, and he knows a little bit about how these things go.
From Mohawk Valley, legal eagle, lawman.
He is the Sheriff of Fulton County, New York. Just such an amazing guy.
This is the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet.
Welcome to the Rich Giardino Show. I'm your host, Rich Giardino. This is where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet. My co-host for today's program is Jenna Roth. You can catch us on YouTube, X, Facebook, Spotify, Apple, and all premium podcast platforms. We're doing another in a series of cold case and missing persons cases. And today we're focusing on upstate New York, the Albany Capital District region, and the Adirondacks. We'll have three cases to discuss with you: Sheila Shepherd, Betty Conley, and Karen Wilson. If you haven't seen our previous cold cases episodes, please feel free to look for them on YouTube, X, Spotify, Facebook, and all other premium podcast platforms. I want to welcome Jenna again. Hi, Jenna. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Good. So today you've selected three cases, one involving, one missing and two murders, or two murders and one missing?
Two murders and one missing.
Okay. So Jenna researches her cases by all public domain. If it's been a press conference by the police, a website, a Facebook by the family, or other podcasts which have discussed these cases, she reviews them. She vets them to be sure that the information is not just loose rumors, but actually has some credibility and support from law enforcement on them. So we'll start today with Sheila Shepherd. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Sheila Shepherd, what the circumstances were of her case, and a little bit about what the investigation showed.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start by telling you a little bit about Sheila. She was 22 years old when she was murdered. Sheila married young. Her husband was in the military, and she actually moved to Germany with her husband. They did have a young daughter together. When they moved back to the States, they moved to California, where her and her husband split up. They decided to go separate ways. Sheila moved then from California to Colorado with her young daughter, and lived with her aunt and uncle for a little while before returning back to her hometown, Saratoga Springs, New York, in May of 1980. Sheila's daughter, however, did go with her father at that point, and she was estranged from her husband. And her daughter was living with her husband. So she lived alone when she moved back to Saratoga Springs, New York. She lived on a second-story apartment, and she was 22 years old, and she was at the time going to school.
Okay, so what happened in her case? What was the spark that brought the police to investigate it?
Sure. So it was actually her teacher at the Worldwide Educational Services School where she was attending that on the second day in a row where Sheila did not appear for class, her teacher was concerned and did phone Sheila's mother, who went to her apartment to check on her with her aunt and uncle. Now, when they got to the apartment, they could hear Sheila's radio playing inside. However, the door was locked and she was not answering. So in her apartment building, there was a fire escape up the side, and that led right to Sheila's bedroom window, which her family knew normally she did keep unlocked. And her uncle was able to climb the fire escape. He was able to peer into the window. He could see Sheila in bed. However, she was covered by a blanket. The only thing he could really see was her one foot hanging out from the end of the bed, out of the blanket. And then that is when he, of course, was trying to get her attention, wasn't working. He crawled into the window where he noticed she was deceased pretty quickly. And that is when he ran downstairs through the front door and yelled to a neighbor to call 911.
So back then, not everybody had cell phones.
Right.
And usually, Jenna, in law enforcement, my experience as a police officer, a district attorney, and a judge indicate when there's a dead female, we usually, on the top list of suspects, is a known individual in their life, generally a husband or ex-boyfriend or ex-husband. Those are usually the prime the usual suspects.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So did they rule out the husband, the estranged husband, because he was estranged? And before you answer that question, why did he get custody of the child and not her? Do you know?
Yeah. So they did rule him out, but I believe it was more so also because he wasn't living in the area at the time at all. Again, they were estranged and they had been for quite some time. And he actually did not have custody of the daughter either. They both believe that it was in their daughter's best interest to live with her estranged husband's parents.
Okay. So tell us what the next step in the police investigation was after they got their 911 call.
Yeah. So when police arrived on the scene, it was a pretty brutal scene to walk into. Sheila, again, she was in her bed with the blanket covered over her. When they removed the blanket, they did notice that she was tied to the bed frame, both arms and legs, and she did have one single knife in her abdomen. However, there were some odd things that they noticed pretty quickly as well. There was no blood that the naked eye could see. I read one report where there was the tiniest drop and one report where it was microscopic and you couldn't see it with the naked eye of blood. So to be stabbed in the abdomen, you would expect blood. The coroner was able to determine that that stab wound had to have happened no sooner than 30 minutes after she had already passed. So that was postmortem. And also they believe her being tied to the bed frame was also postmortem because the ties were very loose. She could have easily fought out of them. And they also did discover she had a cloth that was placed down her throat from a sweater that she had in.
Yeah. Fast forward to this year, there was a trial where two consenting adults agreed to use chloroform and knock each other out, I guess, and have sex and be tied up. Was there anything that was publicly disclosed that led the police to believe that she had multiple partners and strange habits, sexual, habits?
Yeah. So nothing in particular. They did mention she was 22 years old. She was single, living alone. And of course she, would go out with friends. They assumed she dated. At the time, they did not mention whether or not she had a boyfriend. But that they do believe that she was, out that night, the night before she was, 2 days before she was found. But no, I know the police also did mention that they wondered if it could have happened accidentally, like if she was having sexual relations with someone and it happened by accident because the cause of death was ruled asphyxiation. So suffocation, believed to be by that sash of fabric they found in her throat. However, they wondered again, was that by accident? Did they not meet? Was it not supposed to happen like that? Or did the suspect kind of wanted to throw police off by placing the knife in her abdomen, by tying her up? Or was it ritualistic? Was it something that the suspect, was it a ritual he was performing? Again, it happened postmortem. So,
did you find any evidence or information to indicate that there was other females her age or in the area with suspicious or similar kinds of deaths?
So no, I didn't, but there was a case that happened roughly around the same time, probably within 6 months or so, I believe, after, where an Albany County coroner was performing an autopsy. And he also had the victim with one single stab wound in the abdomen. And it sparked enough, her case was so interesting by the way she was murdered that he called the Saratoga Springs Police Department just to tell him that he found it. But at the end of the day, there was no correlation between the two cases. But it was enough that it's a very rare finding.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the reasons that the podcasts and television programs like 48 Hours, 2020, these concentrate on a lot of these old cases, cold cases, if you will, missing person, is because even though this is 1980 that it happened, a lot of times individuals who commit these acts will get drunk, will not be able to live with their conscience, and they tell somebody. And the person either keeps it to themselves or discloses it. So we're doing these series of programs in the hopes that maybe somebody remembers something from back then, whether you were in her class, whether you were friends with her, whether you were out at a bar the night that this girl went missing, and you think of something that you didn't tell the police or you didn't know you were never interviewed that might be of help in these cases. So that's why we ask you to share these cases so that the more people that see them. There was a case that Jen and I discussed a while ago where the husband and wife were driving, listening to a cold case podcast, and the husband had lived in the area years earlier at the same time as this girl was murdered, and he remembered stuff that helped solve the case, even though he didn't live in the area anymore. So we ask you to share these. There's different workmen, there's individuals who might be in the military that travel through, truck drivers, and then they go to other areas and you have similar type of cases. So we're gonna, not only are we gonna ask you to contact the tip lines and the emails, but we'll have an email at the end of the program that you can contact our show directly, and we can get the information to the right police agencies. But again, we ask you to share these. Anything else that we should know? Is it kind of a literally cold case, or has there been any activity with Sheila Shepherd in the last few years?
So it's a cold case. It's cold. I mean, they're really, police have gotten tips in that, and they want tips. They want people talking, and this is exactly why we do it. They want people talking about these cases. But as far as I know, there are not any significant leads in her case.
Okay. So you're listening to the Rich Giardino podcast, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet. This is another in our series of podcasts involving cold casing and missing person cases with our co-host Jenna Roth on these cases. If you missed any of our previous ones, please go back and look them up. YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Rich Giardino Show. And we did one on Kelly Sue Ackernite. We had her husband who wanted to be heard and her daughter. We've also done other cold cases that we asked you to listen to. We're trying to do this series to educate people and maybe close out some of these cases and bring resolution to the family, even though some of them are 50 years old, 45, 20 years old. They are important to the person's family, and they're important to us to want to bring closure to it. And maybe if we're fortunate enough, get enough evidence or have individuals who provide the police with evidence to make an arrest. So again, we're on X, YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, Apple, and any other premium podcast platform. So the next case we're going to talk about today is Betty Conley. Betty Conley is the store one, Jenna?
Yes, she is.
So what's interesting about this, Betty Conley, Jenna's going to tell you the story about that, but there was a case in Central Bridge years ago where people were working, two people, and they were gunned down in Central Bridge, and that was years ago as well. And so the overnight night clerks, what's weird is because of COVID and other things, very rarely do we have overnight stores. A lot of gas stations used to be 24, a lot of convenience stores, a lot of places that we normally go were 24 hours, 7 days a week. They're not, a lot of them now close at 10, 11 or midnight or late, later or earlier in the evening. So go ahead and tell us a little about Betty Conley.
Yeah, so Betty Conley, she was 37 years old at the time of her death. She was a mother of two, a wife. She worked two jobs. It was reported that she was working the second job, which was a convenience store, night shift position. She was raising money for her daughter's college tuition. She was found shot to death at this convenience store. Her shift started at midnight that night, and they believe it happened anywhere from 2 to 3 a.m. Again, she was shot once, and only $100 was taken out of the register, and that is what police are left with. There really wasn't much at all in her case.
And back then, we didn't have videotapes. The stores didn't have tapes.
Right.
A lot of people didn't have cell phones. We didn't have cameras on the street. So now if something like this happened today, the store would have video cameras. Stores across the street the police may have it on pole cameras. So you'd have a lot more evidence. But is Betty Conley the one you were telling me that someone in the family made a video?
Yes, it was her daughter. Her daughter has a friend who is a filmmaker and is tech savvy, and she was able to, in 2020 during COVID, because her daughter is a wedding photographer. Of course, then all the weddings were postponed, and her friend, they made a video on the anniversary of her death is when they released it, and it pulled in a lot of interest back into her case. Again, her case was from 1993. And they, of course, they had a lot of new leads coming in, none that I know of that were of any real significance, but it really helped to bring that attention back to her case. A lot of people in our area, because this is not terribly far from where we live, saw her signs on the side of the road, what happened to Betty. And I mean, they really did an excellent job bringing attention and light back to her case.
So this is a Saratoga County Sheriff's case. They still take leads and follow up on them. They're doing it jointly with the New York State Police cold case unit. And we have both the number for the sheriffs for tips and the number for the state police for tips. Can you tell people how they can get to see the video of what happened to Betty Conley? Where do they go to see that? Is it Facebook or a family website or what?
So I know that it's streamed on YouTube, but I have seen it shared on Facebook. Some of the news articles also shared it as well, because her daughter did go on some of the local news stations to talk about the video. And of course, they have the link listed there. But it is on YouTube.
Okay. Now, in that case, was there anything else any other possible leads that would be helpful?
No, they speculated that possibly the suspect could have been in his mid-20s to mid-30s range. Was it someone that comes in frequently to the mini mart? Was it just a passerby? Because on the road where the convenience store was located, it's a long, road. There's many people that travel far, and they utilize that road while traveling. So it really, it's up in the air. Was it just a passerby going through town, and now he's, or she is gone? Was it someone that goes in frequently? They don't know. And like you said, without surveillance, it's so hard back in 1993 to have any leads if no evidence is left behind.
As we said earlier, our intent is to try to generate leads to give the family closure, hopefully to find a suspect, so police can investigate it further with possibly charges. You always see in the newspaper, cold case closed by DNA, cold case closed by a friend, telling somebody that, geez, a guy in a bar told me he killed someone. So anything you can think of about that convenience store, if you used to stop there, anyone who you used to see all the time and stop going there afterwards. And again, this is one of those cases where it could have been somebody passing through. So you might be living in California, Florida, or Montana, and you might have information of what happened in this case. And again, this is Saratoga County Sheriff's case. We'll have the information posted in the tip line to the state police cold case unit, which could help this. But the more you share this, the more possibility of somebody seeing it who may have information. We also urge and encourage you to go online and find the Betty Conley videotape prepared by the family and friends. That gives you a more in-depth look at this. And again, we could spend 3 hours on each case, but this is just to give you an idea of some leads, some of the cases that have happened around here, and hopefully generate some interest in these old cases, these old cold cases. Again, share, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, X, Apple. The more people that share this, the more likely it is that somebody will see what's going on. So I'm with my co-host on this series we're doing on cold cases and missing persons, Jenna Roth. Jenna, the final case you have for us today is Karen Wilson, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Tell us about Karen Wilson's case.
Yeah. So Karen Wilson, she's a missing person. She was a senior at the University of Albany in Albany, New York. She was getting ready to go on vacation, and she was at the mall one afternoon. And after that, she went tanning at a tanning hut that is located in Conley, New York. That was around 7:20 p.m. And after she went tanning is the last time anyone has seen Karen Wilson.
Did she have a vehicle or did she walk places?
She was walking. So she was within walking distance.
Now, her case reminds me is similar to Susan Lyle.
Yes.
Wasn't Susan Lyle a college student at SUNY? And
Yes.
was the time frame the same or different?
Susan Lyle was in Karen Wilson went missing in March 27th of 1985. And Susan Lyle, I believe, was 1990.
Okay.
So they were within just as short of a few years of each other.
Okay. Tell us, so what steps did they take, and did they have any findings after that? I mean, again, if this had happened today, there would be video cameras at the tanning salon outside. People would have trackers on their phone and things like that, which they don't.
Right.
Then, I mean, so what did they find? Did they come up with any leads along the way as to where she might have disappeared to?
No. The only thing they saw was her walking down Central Ave in Colony, and that was really it. And I believe it was only 3 witnesses that called in that described her. So what they believe is Karen Wilson walking down Central Ave. But other than that, that was really it. They said that there was one witness that said that there was a man walking across on the opposite side of the road. But again, and they did put out a description of him. They did try to find him, but no one ever came forward.
Yeah. And again, this is a Troop G New York State Police case. We have the number and the email for them. Again, we're going to put on an email to reach us at the show. If you have information, but you either have reasons for not wanting to go to the police, or you want to get the information to the right place. If you can't, read it or see it, or you're listening, you can send an email to us at our show, and we'll see that it gets to the right place. One thing that I noticed, the same thing with Sheila Shepherd and Karen Wilson, it's a retro style, the puffy hair, the Farrah Fawcett hairstyle, and things of that nature, So they look similar to each other, and similar in the sense that just the age and the hairstyle, different colored hair and things, I think. But my point is that you often wonder if there's one person doing more of these. And they found over the years, we found truck drivers, military people, some people who move all over the country, and they never in the past were able to connect 2 or 3 deaths here with 2 or 3 deaths there. And we're doing better at it. Thousands of people get reported missing every day in this country. Most of them turn up. Many of them who go missing have mental health issues or trying to get away from things. Unsolved, unknown body finds. There's several thousand in the computer. We have a thing called Name Us, where you have a picture or you have a descriptor of somebody who's found dead, and they don't know necessarily always if it's a homicide or accident or whatever. But you go on these websites, and there's a ton of websites of missing people in my area, and Missing People 518. You could follow on those lines. We hope you enjoyed today's show as much as you can enjoy a show about missing people and cold cases. But our goal and our intent is to try to bring closure to the families. Is there anything else we need to know about Karen Wilson's case that you can think of from your research?
So I know you mentioned sometimes when missing person cases, sometimes people do just want to leave. They want to leave their old life, right? However, with Karen Wilson, I know her mother or family members, they said, by all means, she had a lot of friends. She was getting ready to go on spring break with friends. So it would not be so likely that she just decided one day, I'm just going to leave my life. And so with her case, it's absolutely suspicious of her missing.
One of the things I'd like to do in one of our future shows, there's two prosecutors who've been missing for years. One's called John Luna, Luna. He was a federal prosecutor who was in the midst of a trial, and they found his car with blood in it, and they had his cards for a throughway where he was in Pennsylvania or something, and that was real suspicious. And then there was another guy called Ray Gracir. They've never found Ray, Gracir, and he was another prosecutor who had been the actual district attorney, and I don't know if he got defeated or had retired. He went missing. They never found his computer, I don't think. But those cases are a common theme because they're prosecutors who went missing, and they ruled out that it was an immediate case or anything of that nature. So we could talk about those cases on a special case, on a special podcast in the future. Again, you've been listening to the Rich Giardino Show. My co-host today, Jenna Roth, and this is one in a series we've been doing on cold cases and missing person cases. We ask you to like, share, and subscribe. The more people you share this with, the more chance of us getting some leads and the agencies getting leads. After each case, the name of the agency that's the lead agency or another agency with an email that will take information about these cases will be on your screen or at our website. At our Facebook or website. The other thing is we're in the process of setting up an email where you can send leads directly to us. Again, this has been the Rich Giardino Show with my guest co-host, Jenna Roth, on cold cases and missing people cases. Thank you for listening today. And if you want to go back and listen or watch some of our previous cold cases and missing person cases, you can go to our program on any of those platforms, YouTube, X, Facebook, Apple, Spotify, and look under, missing persons cold case, the Rich Giardino Show, and you'll see our other programs. Thank you very much. And you guys have a good week. This has been the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet, with my co-host for the cold cases, Jenna Roth. Thank you.
Like and subscribe to the Rich Giardino Show, part of the Elite Influencer Network, wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll see you next time on the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet.